Oh, okay. Okay, so on the Underdog Chronicles podcast today, I'm honored to have David Kabwa as our guest today. He is a president of Move, a vibrant and upcoming political party. He was also named Prime Minister of the Commonwealth Youth Games, was one of the Mail and Guardian top 200 young South Africans, and is part of JCI's top 10. Welcome to the show, David. It's a pleasure to have you. Just really, really glad to have you here. Um, I think just before we start and like we get into the nitty-gritty details of like your journey and your story, what would you say is like your favorite book that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Oh, really good question. Um, it's a lot like asking someone what their favorite song is, because I feel like my favorite song changes on a regular basis. What I would recommend at the moment is The Testimony of Steve Biko. Great book. And the reason for that is because it is essentially a record of his last public interaction, his last public address when he was put on trial. Now, it surprises most people when I do not mention I write what I like, which again also is a great book. But what I find fascinating is that the testimony of Steve Biko kind of shows you his mentality, his thinking, his thoughts, but also his intelligence in real time as he's kind of debating with apartheid era, very closed-minded and just bigoted lawyers.
Yeah,
So great book, great read, something I definitely recommend. Good question.
thank you. Um, so I see that like you kind of have this you you kind of you it was a very like so it was a very selective answer. It was very like I don't know, you can see that like kind of where your heart lies. Um, and I think that kind of takes me to my first question, which is kind of could you take me to the beginning of your journey and where it all started?
But I appreciate that. And once again, my gratitude to be here on the Underdog podcast. Very excited, especially when everything starts to blow up. I can say that I was one of the privileged individuals to have the opportunity. So thank you for that. And thank you for having me, and greetings to your audience. Right. So the beginning, I'll begin in high school. When I started in high school, I call myself the king of the high school. I was on every committee, I was in every activity, and we had quite a lot in my school. Everything from chess to rugby to
Oh wow.
athletics to cross country to choir to drama, you name it, I did it, and I did it well. I was also on the top 10 and everything of that sort. So there was kind of a huge expectation. My hometown, small community, everyone kind of had this view that, Dave's going somewhere in life. I wanted to be a doctor. My dad's a doctor. He saves lives all day. What I ever wanted to do in life, if I was to summarize my greatest ambition, it is simply to help people. So now I was so confident that the only thing I had applied for was medicine.
Oh wow.
Now
Okay.
I write my matric results uh, and get them back. They're not what I had hoped. So now I go from being kind of the king of the high school to the guy who peaked in high school. And this began kind of a very existential crisis that I was dealing with at the time. So I had two options: either upgrade my results or try and pursue a BSc. And I chose to do, the former, upgrade my results. And during that period, I enrolled in a school that opened me to the opportunity to join the Children's Parliament in Gauteng. And I remember walking into this building, Gauteng Provincial Legislature, my first time. Big, beautiful building. I wasn't supposed to be there. I just happened to get on a bus that other learners were on that ended up there. Because I wasn't supposed to be there, I remember walking into this room with this gigantic table, a table large enough to take up the entire room, clearly meant for people to have an exhaustive discussion. And I sat in the back with someone's little sister because technically I wasn't allowed.
Yeah.
They then went on and they asked for a scribe, and a scribe is the person who takes the notes, the minutes, the record keeper essentially.
Yeah.
And no one wants to do this because you don't get to engage as much. And I said, well, I put my hand up and I said, I will be your scribe. They have never had a more vocal scribe in their history. Long story short, I then get elected as the chairperson of the committee that I was in.
Oh
So I
wow.
moved from
Okay.
sitting in the back of the room to the front of the table. and I love what we were doing. We wrote up a bunch of recommendations, sent it to the Premier's office, ended up changing the lives of up to 15,000 children in Gauteng. And I kind of fell in love with everything that we were doing. And I realized, well, politics is a different way to help people. So I decided to enroll for a Bachelor of Political Science. And that's what I did in my first year at the University of Victoria. Then went on to do an honors in international relations, a master's in diplomatic studies, and now I'm pursuing a PhD in international relations again. So throughout this kind of journey, there was a reality that I had experienced, and that is what I like to express as the following: that I understood that to get anywhere in life, you must be willing to say that I cannot be defeated, I cannot be denied, and I cannot be disgraced. I think it is fitting that this podcast is called the Underdog Podcast because that was very much the view that I had. The perception people had of me at the time is that, well, you are a failure because you did not get in for your initial choice. And all of my other friends were going to university. I was repeating my matric essentially. Now I get in as a first year student and I meet a young man in a blazer and I ask him, why are you wearing a uniform? This is a university. And he says, oh, I'm the chairperson of this faculty. I said, okay, great. I want to do what you do. He says, young man, you're first year, calm down.
Yeah.
About 8 months later, I was elected as the first year chair of faculty. So I took over from him. It was a very
Oh,
funny
wow.
kind of set of events. My second year, I decided that I want to do more. I want to get better involved. So I ran for SRC President. And think of it this way: if a university is a high school, then the president is like the head boy. It's a very politicized process. So you undergo elections and you contest against the major political parties in South Africa. So I went up against the ANC, DA, EFF, and I decided to run as an independent. At the time, running as an independent was considered political suicide. Independents did not win elections. So no one took my candidacy seriously in the beginning. I went on to win that election and served for a fantastic term, worked with amazing people. I then decided to run for re-election, which was, again, something quite controversial at the time. No one ever ran for re-election.
Yeah.
I ran for re-election. I was subsequently re-elected. So I became not only the first independent to have completed the term, but also the first two-term SRC president and still hold the record for one of the highest percentages ever. From there, I had the opportunity to serve in the Gauteng Youth Sector Parliament. The work we did was profound. I was recognized to represent South Africa in the Commonwealth Youth Parliament. The Commonwealth is basically the 54 countries that were previously colonized by the British. And there I stood for Prime Minister. No African had ever done this before. So I was elected as the Prime Minister and became the first ever African in this role, overseeing the legislative affairs of young people across 54 different countries. From there, I had the opportunity to do a bit of work with the African Union. It's also the focus of my research, my PhD, on a platform called African Youth for Transitional Justice, which basically just means that young people looking at post-conflict situations on the continent. I became a certified expert in this area from the Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Security in the African Union. And then what I'm up to right now is I'm serving as the head of operations at the Center for Commonwealth Affairs, which basically means I'm overseeing Southern African knowledge production to the Commonwealth within the center. And yes, subsequently started my own political party with the intent of contesting next year's general election. So that's kind of the quick summarized version of the journey, if I were to give it that way.
Wow, that's an incredible journey. Like it's honestly like you came from like a small town where you were like in a high school and you were doing everything possible and then having like that dip and like having that setback and then just like rising up from that. That's like a true story of like an underdog. And I wow, it's like I mean, this is just the beginning of your journey and you've got so far. That's like incredible. Um and this so you told me that you kind of got into politics as like it was almost like a pleasant accident, like almost like it was serendipity, you could say. Um, or was it intentional? Because you have a bit of like, was it some, were you when you got onto that bus, were you just curious as to see what was going on, or did you already feel like this inclination that there was something waiting for you at the other side?
It's a really good question. Again, I'm loving it. It I suppose that bus ride in particular was very serendipitous indeed. But my foray into politics really wasn't. So I remember when I was younger, I loved public speaking, something I'd always been very fond of. One of the ways that I got known in my high school, and by the way, I'm still today about what, 6, 7 years later, I still hold the highest amount of votes for any prefect in the school's history. Um, I would always take the opportunity to encourage people to speak to them. And as I began to do this, I wanted to get beyond the level of simply speaking. I wanted to be actively doing good, which is why when I began thinking career wise, I looked at, well, who's doing good in my life? I looked at my father as a doctor, but I also saw that one of the ways that he was able to do good was he knew how to engage people. He has a heart for people, speaking to them and such. So I just never considered uh, politics until that point because I was not exposed to it. And once I was exposed to it, I then made the very conscious and conscientious decision that I'm going to switch what I study. And not only am I going to switch what I study for academic purposes, I wanted to apply what it is that I'm studying. Now, the way that I ended up on that bus in particular was I remember when I first showed up at the school, uh, I was at a different high school now, so I went to another high school to upgrade my matric results. And at this stage, I was very much ostracized in my life. The guy who peaked in high school, I used to be in the town newspaper just about every other week. And now people kind of felt pity when they would see me take out the trash. Like, oh, shame. And, I went from being the top to kind of the very bottom. So something very difficult for me to deal with. Now, when I enter this school, my thinking is, okay, let me get back my mojo. So I walked straight to the principal's office. Amazing man. I credit him a lot. And I said, hi, my name is David. I'm new to the school and I'd like to speak to your students. And he said, well, we're about to go to assembly when we have a whole program. I can't just allow you. And I said, okay, well, how much time can you give me? He's like, I don't know, 30 seconds. I said, okay, great. Give me 30 seconds. And when he realized that I was being serious, he said, okay, cool. I'll give you 30 seconds. So I got up and I made a statement that you will often hear me say on any public platform that I am on. And I wrote this in a speech in grade 11. And it is something that I believe wholeheartedly. That is that we have the capacity and the capability to loosen the shackles of mediocrity that have bound so many to complacency. And that was essentially my message in that 30-second kind of address. A standing ovation. It was great. And immediately I'm approached afterwards and they're like, yo, man, great speech, dog. Well done. Yeah, no. And I'm like, oh, thank you, appreciate that. Yeah, man, let's go out and let's get some drinks tonight, man. We're gonna treat you. I said, okay, cool. I don't drink, but I appreciate it. Let's go and have some fun. They said, well, okay, that's cool, man. You don't drink, all good, all good. We'll get some weed, man. We'll hook you up. We'll have a good time. I said, okay, cool. Yeah, let's have ourselves a good time. I don't smoke, but I don't mind chilling. You do what you do, I do what I do, and we just enjoy ourselves. I said, okay, well, F man, what do you do? I said, well, F man, I don't know. I said, well, F man, you won't say F. And I said, oh, I don't swear. I said, okay, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't swear. But you're young. There's no young person that doesn't at least do one of those three. So now I immediately move again into a space where I am ostracized. I am less than. The perception was, oh, he thinks he's better than us. Now no one wants to speak to me. So because I had no one to talk to, I'd spend my break time speaking to the cleaners and the gardeners, and basically forging a good relationship with the staff. And it was while I'm sitting in the garden speaking to the gentleman who was tending the garden that I saw these learners kind of getting on a bus going nowhere. And I was like, okay, well, no one wants to speak to me here, so I might as well see where this bus is going. And that's kind of what prompted the series of events. And if I take this point and extrapolate it, during my first term, during my term as House Humanities Chair, so I was the Humanities Faculty Chair, that was the faculty I was referring to. I saw an incident where there was a young man came on a bus from KZN. His mom gave him the last 100 rand that she had. I sent him on a bus and said, hey, don't know if this will help, but you have good marks. You haven't applied. Maybe they might be able to assist you. A very intelligent young man, but from a very rural community, so he didn't know how to use a computer, nor did he know how to apply online. So he just came with his matric results, hoping that, okay, it's good enough for me to get in. But the waiting list at the time was about 25,000 people, so obviously it would be very difficult for this young man to get in. He approaches one political party, they take him and they put him aside, keep him in a room for like 8 hours. They wait until the evening and they bring them to the rooms of the then SRC with the message that, hey, you guys are the ones who are in authority now. Here's someone that needs your help at like 2 in the morning. And I'm watching all of this take place and I'm thinking, when we are in the midst of politicking, how many people do we lose in the interim? And this is where I really decided that more than in the realm of studies, I really want to enter the space formally. Not so much because I have anything against any political party. I have nothing against any political party. I just believe we can do things different. And that's also what prompted me to run as an independent. So I'd say it began with serendipity, but is culminating in a very intentional choice.
That's incredible. I think I love how you kind of you just kept moving. Like that's really inspiring. Is that I think it's again, and it kind connects with your party's name, Move. Is like from
Yeah.
from the time that you experienced that setback in, after grade 12, you just kept moving from the time that people were like kind of you were ostracized and like you didn't really have a lot of friends at the time because you were different. You just kept moving, and that was like, I think, like a constant thing that I can like see from you telling me your story, is that you just kept moving. um and yeah, I mean, what would you say inspired you to start Move, and like what is the inspiration behind the name, although it is it's a bit obvious, but I mean, I'd love to hear what's the story behind it.
I appreciate that. I think I did an interview recently that was published in the South African, um, but I think this is the first time I'm verbalizing kind of the background behind it. So I made the decision that I wanted to run for parliament. Um, and at this stage, I was receiving quite a number of offers from various political parties, which I'm very grateful for and very deeply appreciative for the level of consideration that I've received. Um, I chose to turn down all of those offers. Reason being that, again, my view has just been that I believe that we can do things differently. So I started to undergo the process of trying to register as an independent. There's a new law in South Africa called the Electoral Amendment Bill, which basically changed our constitution to allow independents to run for the first time, meaning in the 2024 election, it will be the first election where you can run nationally without a political party. Prior to that, you were only able to do so if you were contesting for a ward seat in your local municipality. Um, so as I'm undergoing this process, I'm also following what's happening within the Constitutional Court and the new law that is coming into being. This law had four major issues in the way that it manifested. The first was that independents were expected to pay the same amount as political parties. So you can imagine you're talking upwards of about 400,000 Rand here.
Oh wow.
The
Okay.
second is that independents had to get the same amount of, or pardon me, higher amounts of signatures than political parties. So most political parties now were formed with either 500 or 1,000 signatures. So the older ones, 500, the newer ones, it was 1,000. Um, but for an independent, you were expected to get about somewhere between 20 to 40% of the previous vote in terms of the signature requirement. So that percentage, meaning that you needed an excess of about 14,000 signatures. It doesn't make sense if a party needs 1,000 and independent needs 14,000. It's one of the highest um, thresholds in terms of signatures in the world. Um, the other issue was that an independent cannot get votes beyond the threshold. Meaning, let's say hypothetically you need 10,000 votes to win a seat and you get 20,000 votes, then your extra 10,000 votes get redistributed according to the proportional representation model in South Africa. What this means is that um, if you get any votes above the amount you need for a seat, it will get redistributed according to the other parties that are there. Meaning, obviously, your more highly represented parties with a higher vote share would get a higher percentage of your votes. So this would create a situation whereby people voting for you as an independent, other parties might win seats from your excess votes. So I went back to the people I was getting signatures from and I asked that out, would you still vote for me if there's a chance that your vote will not go to me? And they said, no, definitely not. I went back to the drawing board and I began to think, well, how can we address this issue? Um, and I was having a chat with a good friend of mine. He's an expert in populism. So he's doing his PhD in populism studies. And he made the point, when you look at the political landscape today, people want something actionable. You look at most political parties, the economic freedom fighters, build on South Africa, rise and action essay, something actionable. And I remember sitting there and hearing something, and I was thinking, yeah, it's true, man, but we still got to make a move. That's when the name kind of conceptualized. I said, okay, simple, straight to the point. It is not an acronym for anything. It's just move. That it indicates our intent, the intention, and what we seek to do purely based off of the name. So it is essentially the vehicle through which we still want to make a meaningful change, meaningful impact, and a meaningful difference. Much like the theme of this particular podcast, I find that continually I am skirting within the realm of being an underdog, which is something that I rather enjoy. To give you an example, my first election in House Humanities, I was an underdog because I was the first year. No one had ever done it before. When I ran for SRC President, I was an independent, very much an underdog. When I ran for my second term, I thought I was an underdog because I did not have time to campaign. There's a reason why Parliament goes on recess during campaign season. It's very difficult to campaign and be in office. It didn't make sense to me to neglect the office that I'm in to chase that same office. There was that difficulty. When I went to the Commonwealth, amongst many colleagues, the question was being, well, can we have the quality of leadership required to lead us from Africa? So there was that kind of unfortunate mentality that many colleagues had. Even now, within the realm of having formed Move, just getting Move registered as a form of political party with the whole process in and of itself. Um, and additionally, still undergoing quite a number of barriers. To give you an example, it costs about 300,000 rand just to get your logo printed on a ballot paper. It costs 45,000 rand per province to contest. So if you're going to contest all 9 provinces, you're looking at about 450,000 rand just to contest. If you're contesting nationally, it's about 750,000 rand, give or take. The kind of difficulties still remain. But I remain hopeful. I remain excited because it is a move that we are making together. It is a step that we are taking forward. And I always say a step is a step in the right direction so long as it is a step taken forward. I believe that young people have the ability to make a meaningful change and a meaningful impact because young people are not only the future, we are the present. We are taking up the space and we are doing it with competence, with capability, and with the ability to deliver. And that would be kind of my view in this regard. So this is what really prompted the formation of Move.
Wow. Leaving me speechless. um, so you said that, so would you say that Move is very heavily like centered around young people and just like focusing on like empowering young people? Would that be one of the main kind of focuses of what your party like stands for?
But I appreciate that. In terms of our target demographic, yes, we are targeting young people. You'll see this in our executive committee and in the representatives that we have. Uh, Very much hold that view that the time for young people is now. We need to see ourselves represented in these spaces. If you as a young person join most political formations, the view will be okay, spend a couple of years putting up posters, spend a couple more years on the ground campaigning for others, basically pay your dues, and maybe we'll see if we can give you an opportunity in the future. Whereas there are various young people who are highly competent and highly capable. So it is not something that I ascribe to. One of the members of my team once asked, well, when are we going to form a youth wing of Move? And I vehemently rejected the idea. I said, we cannot categorize young people as kind of the other. We'll take young people, put them in a corner over there, and kind of do your own thing while we see to other matters. Young people should be at the table. In terms of the focus areas of Move, so Move has been founded in what I call the ideal of good governance. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just do what needs to be done to do it well. And to accomplish good governance, I'll focus on three focus areas. The first is what I refer to as accessible leadership. From my team, I'll have about 8 people who will remain after the election just to ensure that any and all communications received, communications that get responded to, I believe in accessible leadership. Meaning that even if in this first election I might not have the vote share to implement policy change, I can ensure that as a public representative, all matters brought to my attention are placed on the national agenda. That I can do very well. Second is what I refer to as bridge building. Now, I believe that we must build bridges for all South Africans to be able to walk across, which is why, although my emphasis is on young people, I also, with warm and open arms, welcome those who are young in spirit, because each of us has a role to play and each of us can make a meaningful contribution. So bridge building essentially speaks to that, but also the notion that if you have a good idea, I don't care who you are, I don't care where you came from, if it's going to help people, then we need to get to work on that. I was twice voted SRC Member of the Year by my colleagues who were in various political parties. This was because my approach has been, if you have an idea that will help, I will implement it. So I was regularly in communication and discussions with leaders from various political parties, and actually putting to work a lot of these suggestions and ideas that I had received. And we did see that it did benefit quite a number of people. For example, we ran feeding schemes. We fed in excess of 400 students during COVID. We delivered probably more than 2,000 laptops to students all over the country, providing data and resources, negotiating for generators at various campuses. Was one of the proponents behind various anti-discrimination policies that were put in place, things of that nature. So the notion of bridge building, if you have a good idea, it's an idea that I want to hear, and I don't care where that idea comes from. The third is what I refer to as reimagining political culture. And this, I think, is very important in the South African context. We need to reimagine political culture through servant leadership, to create the understanding that the greatest leaders are the most humble servants. And that is the role that a leader is to play. And then we call our ministers ministers because the idea is that they are to minister services to the people. And this is something that I very much think should come back. So good governance, through accessibility, bridge building, and reimagining political culture.
Wow. It's it's not every day you hear like someone involved in politics talking about servant leadership. Because I think even I'm 21, but even though I'm not like to 40 or I haven't like experienced, I don't have that many years of experience, I can still see how like the people around me react to the word politics and politicians and parties, and just the whole attitude towards it is not the most positive, because oftentimes we not me but people feel let down by those in power because they feel like they they are not heard, they are not servant leaders, and they just abuse the power and the resources that they're given. So to hear that what you are talking about is quite different to the current political climate is quite refreshing, and also gives a lot of hope to even like a young person as myself, um, of like the future of our country, which is very like it's very like motivating and hopeful. Um,
Ooh,
and
a dog, Mary, you gonna get me started right now. Man, before we move on, um, I really need to hop on that point. That is the importance of hope. I believe that in our current political climate, the kind of emphasis has been on what we call the politics of fear. Vote for us or else this will happen. or vote for us to prevent that from happening, or vote for us if you don't want to lose X, Y, and Z. So basically, vote for us out of the fear of some other thing. This is the prevailing narrative, and we have lost the politics of hope. And I believe that when we galvanize young people, that it really will make a meaningful impact and a meaningful difference. In Thailand recently, there was an election where a new party um, galvanized young people. And they won, I think, I don't remember the exact number, but their parliament has somewhere in the ballpark of about 400 seats, give or take. And they won, I think, somewhere in the ballpark of between 250 to 300. So they won a large majority simply because young people stood up, made their voices heard. In the last election, we had 23 million people who registered to vote out of a population of 56 million. Of that amount, only 18 million voted. And of that amount, only 17 million votes were legitimate votes. So the rest were, mistakes and illegitimate votes and things of that nature. So we can get young people. This is where we will start to see the biggest change. And every person who's watching this, I want to remind you that you matter, your voice matters, and your vote matters. You need about 40,000 votes to win one seat in parliament under our current model. You can imagine in a case such as mine, every single vote counts, and it will make a meaningful difference. I want to encourage you, get up, get involved, become an active citizen, and feel free. If you check out my website, my direct contact details are there. I engage people all the time. I say, okay, you don't have to agree with me, but engage me. And even if you don't end up voting for me, I still want you, obviously, I do want you to vote for me, but I still want to make sure that you get up and you go and vote. And I get random calls at all hours of the day. Okay, what is your view on this issue and such? And we have kind of that back and forth discussion, and I love it. We need this level of debate. So for all of us, young people in this country, we need to remember that it is hope of the youth that has carried South Africa into this democracy. It has been the hope of the youth that has been behind every major movement that you have seen throughout history. Probably about, I believe, somewhere in the ballpark of about 60% of them started in institutions of higher learning, started led by young people. Even those spaces that we consider the great democracies, the founding fathers in the US, for example, the average age among them was between 20 to 25, and these are the people who were the founding fathers. And these are kind of the facts that we forget, because when we look at historical figures and pictures, we see, kind of individuals who are very wise with their white hair, but not realizing that when they started as young people. So our hope, our ability to galvanize, and our ability to mobilize, it helps, it works, and it does make a difference.
That's wow. So yeah, I'm saying wow a lot in this interview. But I think that's like the probably the only like appropriate word to use after like what you've been sharing with me. I mean, it is quite, as I said earlier, it's really refreshing to hear that as a young person, there is like that we count. Because I think, I mean, you're telling me the stats of like for the previous elections. I mean, how many people actually voted? It's shocking. I mean, people don't don't seem to have that hope that you speak about, that we should have that hope towards politics. We live in a kind of a political climate where it's motivated by fear, motivated by people don't really want to choose any party because they're like, you're just going to let me down. And I think having a party like yours and having kind of the mindset that you have, that we need to move, we need to actually like put our words into action, and even if we have to take baby steps, let's take them. And as you said, the everyone starts as like a young kid, and we often tend to forget that when we see these really successful people, we're like, you were once, at the beginning of your journey, which is kind of what this podcast is about. finding people at the beginning of their journey and just kind of walking with them and like recognizing them as what you are kind of doing in your party and in terms of like your mindset that's kind of taken you through from like your university days to where you are now, you know, valuing people's opinions. And if you have a good idea, no matter who you are, you know, I want to hear it. And I think that's incredible that you have this kind of model of accessible leadership, because that's kind of it was quite new for me to hear, because often like you know, you have these leaders but you're like, I don't know if I can talk to you, like I don't think you have like the time for me. So yeah, it's just really really incredible to hear. I see that our time is the time for this meeting is going to expire, but I will restart the meeting so you can just kind of finish it properly without me rushing it. But yeah, thank you so much for like everything so far, and I will see you in like a minute.
Okay, see you now.
Okay, we are back. Thank you for your patience. Yeah, one day I will have enough money for this Zoom to be pro, and then
Yes,
have,
we are still in the underdog stages.
yes, very much so. Um, I think just tying to that last point that I made, I wanted to ask you, um, what would you say are some lessons that you've learned along the way? Because I mean, you did take me through a few of the struggles that you've learned and like, you know, how hard it is actually to set up a new party in terms of like financial struggles and, you know, in terms of like how kind of how the whole legal system is wired to independent parties. But what lessons would you say you've learned so far in dealing in this realm?
Right, I appreciate that. And again, another really, really good question. So there are three things that I'll highlight for the purpose of this discussion. The first is that you need to find where you are rooted. And this is very, very important. If you do not have roots, you will be blown over by the wind. You will be torn apart by the hurricanes. You will be picked apart by animals pulling you out of the ground. You need to be rooted. And the question then becomes, where are you rooted and what are you rooted in? This becomes a very, very fundamental question because there will be times where your motivation is lacking. And this becomes very, very key. I did a forum recently called the New Africa Forum. It was great. We had people who joined from an excess of about 20 countries. And I remember I got a question from a young man who was joining online. I say, he was joining online, and he asked the question, and he said, "Hey, thanks for what you said. Feel motivated, very encouraged." And he then takes a step back, and he begins to describe his surroundings. How he was joining from an internet cafe that he had to walk about 4 kilometers to reach to tune into the discussion. And how outside of that cafe, there's very little development, very little infrastructure, very little plumbing, um, and just not much to write home about. Um, and he was joining from a particular village within the Sadek region. Uh, and he then asked me, well, when I leave here, how can I make sure things are actually different? And this is why it is important to have a root, because when your motivation is lacking, what I'm about to say is very powerful. Your motivation is lacking. It is discipline that will take you across the finish line. And this is the second point. So the first is you need to be rooted. The second is you need to develop a level of discipline. And your discipline will be linked to whatever your root is. And your root is linked to your purpose. So for me, my purpose has been to to ensure that we can empower young people and that we make this country a better place. And I have been rooted in this ideal. So most actions that I take are very closely related to my roots. So that is why, for example, I made it a priority to have this discussion with you. It is why I still am involved with the work in the African Union, with the work in the Center for Commonwealth Affairs, although I am pushing within the realm of politics as well, just because everything that I'm doing is centered around my roots. If you, for example, Google my name, you will notice that most things that come up are very closely related to young people, to the empowerment thereof, and just to bettering society, communities, and engaging within the realm of politics, but also in the realm of civil society. And this route is what caused me to develop this discipline. I think at the stage that you and I had met, I was speaking to about 700 people per day. Very, very exhausting, very tiring and time consuming endeavor. And I'd be up on my feet from about 5 in the morning, and I would be walking around just looking for people to speak to until about 9 o'clock in the evening. And I made sure that on a daily basis I would reach my target. Um, this was a discipline that allowed me to move forward because the first week you feel great, you're motivated, it's awesome, you're going to take on the world. The second week, you kind of start to develop cramps in your calf muscles and such. The third week, you're just exhausted because I'm still a student on top of everything else. And then you are no longer motivated, which is why you need that discipline to carry you forward. The third, and this is the final, and everything I've said I believe is important, but this is the most important. That is the following phrase, that life is a matter of decision. But when you have made a decision, stick to it, stand by it, move with it. And this is where you will start to see things begin to kind of come into place. And the reason why I say you need to stick to that decision is because other times you may feel that you've made the wrong decision. You may feel like you want to retract your decision. You may feel like you've made a meaningless decision. But this is why the decision needs to come after you have found where you are rooted, after you've developed the discipline that you need, so that when you make these decisions, they are informed decisions and decisions that no one can take away from you. Because yes, oftentimes we may feel happy, but unfortunately, happiness is fleeting. Joy is largely linked to the choices that we make. I choose to be joyful. I choose to respond to hate with love. I choose to respond to negativity with positivity. And I choose to say that no matter what comes my way, I cannot be defeated. I cannot be denied, and I will not be disgraced. And these are the three things that I think really stood out for me throughout the journey that I'm still undertaking.
Well, um, so you, I think this is, I think this is, those are what the key takeaways of like this kind of conversation is, because you were talking about, I love how you took me on a journey from talking about like, finding your purpose and like staying rooted in it to like making decisions so that you to stay rooted. And I think that's like a message that a lot of people need to hear, is that I know, like, even personally, like like on a daily basis I make so many decisions. Like I decide to wake up, I decide to go to university, I decide to do this and this and this. And oftentimes you kind of make these 1 second decisions, and you don't really kind of tie it back to why do you do them. Like you don't sit down and be like, what is the purpose of me going to university? What is the purpose of me studying this degree or doing this? Like at times, as you said, you can so easily feel like demotivated, and like life can just get you down, and then it just comes down to the decision of you saying like, this is kind of my purpose, this is why I'm here, and this is why I make these decisions. And then just sticking with them is the tough part sometimes. But what would you say is like, what helped you find your purpose? Because I know a lot of people, I know even myself, you oftentimes are like, oh, I think, this is a good purpose to have. Like, I want to do this in the world. But then it's like, how do you find your purpose? Not just like the purpose of someone in a book, or of your role model, or the purpose that like maybe your parents want for you, but how do you like find your purpose? Like, what would you say are some things that have helped you find your purpose?
Again, all amazing questions, which I'm very grateful for. It's a high level discussion we're having, and I'm privileged to discuss it. Um, you can imagine. So my dad's a doctor. My mom is a engineer, and they both come from very, let me say, they started in very humble beginnings. I remember at a stage, I was born in a village in Limpopo, which most people I've met haven't heard of. But basically, I'm from rural Limpopo. And I remember at a stage, we did not have much, so I had to wear my sister's clothing just so that I wasn't walking around naked. Um, and this was really where I started to try and understand, the purpose and the reasoning behind all of this. You can imagine, my dad's a doctor. Um, I've come from a Black family. So when you tell your dad, who was a medical doctor, oh, I'm going to go and study political science, um, it took about 2 years for my parents to actually kind of understand what it is that I do. They just thought I sit in class and study the ANC all day. It was quite funny. Um, Now, when I speak about purpose, for me, my purpose is rooted in my faith. And I think for all of us, it will be something different. So I'm simply sharing, this is me, this is what works for me. And my view and my ideology has always been, you do you, I do me, and so long as no one's rights are being trampled upon or no one is being disrespected, then it's all good. So the reason why I mention my faith is because I believe in Jesus Christ, my Lord, my Savior, my Maker, my Creator, my reason for being. And this is what motivates me because I view the space of leadership as a calling. And I take that very, very seriously. It is also a huge part of my identity. Um, and in making my decisions, I spend a lot of time in prayer. Um, so whatever might work for you, it might be prayer, it might be meditation, it might be reading, it might be relaxing, it might be consultation, it might be therapy. For each of us, it will be different. And I think we need to spend a lot of time identifying what our purpose is rooted in so that we know where we are rooted. And in my life, it's definitely my faith.
Huh. So um, I love how when you talk about kind of things that you want for your party and things that you are like doing, and kind of like the lessons you've learned, there is like this common word that's popping up for me, and that's the roots. It seems like it, not seems, it is the fact that you were telling me like about that, that you're a man of faith, and that's kind of what kind of roots you, like your faith roots you. Like I think it's so often um hard to kind of stay rooted in something when you don't necessarily want to be or necessarily allow yourself to be. um but I think especially like having faith and actually believing in something, and being so like strong in that belief, and actually building our foundation and like choosing to be there is incredibly like helpful. Because I'm also like a believer in Christ myself, and I can't, like, we could go on and talk for hours about like his goodness and just how incredible it is to be loved by someone with this unimaginable amount of love. And I think I love what you were saying, that it's so important to know where you come from, to know where you're going, and to know where you are. And it kind of ties into your whole mindset of kind of the youth not only being the future but being the present. because you always like you hear people like say, "Oh, the youth are the future. We need to look after our future." But you're like, but these people are alive like right now. They are your present. Um, and I think it's yeah, it's as I said. I mean, I've been saying, it's just incredible to kind of engage with you and to like meet you on a person to person basis. And not just meet you from like you on a podium standing somewhere and like just be the person, one of the people in the audience. And I love that your approach is like, let's engage, um let's talk, like you are a person, you matter. And I love that you're not just saying these things, but you're actually putting them into action. And as I said, I am extremely grateful for you, because I know that you're probably really busy right now. But I'm extremely grateful for the time that you've given me, to kind of just share your story and just share what you're doing and where you're going and who you are. So thank you.
I really appreciate that. It is really and truly a privilege to be here on the Underdog platform. And I'm excited for your future, for the future of this platform, and excited that one day we'll both look back at this and reminisce about how we started as underdogs. We're doing it, we're going to continue to do it, and it will impact very many lives. Thank you so much, and thanks to your audience.
Thank you again, David. Bye, David. Have a lovely day.